I, I like to take credit for that, but that's all Russ, man. Russ, like, and it's actually a little bit of a misnomer that like the Chargers or the Panthers paid him in Bitcoin. It
Right.
was like any of us, they paid him like a normal deposit in his checking account, and then he had like a third party app that would basically transfer it into
Okay.
Bitcoin.
I bet you
So
made a
it's not
shit.
like, yeah, it's not like the Panthers were
Right.
paying him in
Paying
Bitcoin.
out in Bitcoin.
Yeah,
Dude, so the Chargers kicked the Skins' ass that day. Do you
they
remember that?
did. They did. Yep.
You remember Breland had a pick six late in
Yes.
the game to make it like 40-6, and he
Yeah.
was like going nuts on the sideline, and Gruden
Yes.
grabbed him and screamed at him.
Yes. I do remember that. Yep.
Recording in progress.
That was a
Yeah.
mess.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was crazy to see them in that small of a venue. Remember
Well,
you
and
could
also the
hear
thing
the
that struck me about
audibles?
that, which is still par for the course even today, just the amount of Washington fans that were there.
Totally. Totally. Maybe I'll ask you about that.
So yeah.
We're ready to rock and roll.
Okay,
Cool.
great. All right, you ready to go?
Yep.
All right. 3, 2. Always a pleasure to get to talk to JI Halsell. I mean, there are few people that have the resume of Gonzaga alum, DMV native, NFL agent, front office worker back in the Redskins days. You've done it all. You're gracious with your time. What's up, dude?
Well, I appreciate you having me as always, man. Out here in the valley in Phoenix, braving this 100+ degree weather, but apparently it's not too different than back home in the DMV.
It's hotter today. I don't care what the temperature is in Phoenix. It's hotter here because it's also
Oh,
super humid.
it's because of the humidity difference,
Yeah,
without a
yeah, yeah.
doubt. Yeah, I'd rather be here
Um,
for a lot of
you
reasons.
you and I touch base frequently, but I wanted to reach out to you as this Terry McLaurin contract thing kind of continues. You're a guy that's been on both sides, like the player representation side, the team representation side. I remain confident that Terry and the Commanders get something done, but I wanted to start here. At what point in the summer, like timeline wise, does this go from, okay, they're going to get it done to starting to be concerned?
I think, once rookies report, once we start getting into training camp, I think then it starts to be a little concerning.
Okay.
It's not unusual for these deals to get done in like the week leading up to veterans reporting, as an example. So I would not be concerned if like we get through effectively NFL summer break here, and then we get into mid-July and the deal still isn't done. I wouldn't be concerned. It's once veterans start reporting, if we don't have a deal, then I think it becomes a little bit of a red flag.
So the veterans report date for the Commanders is July 22nd. That's kind of in line with what I thought. I think like July 15th is when we should really kind of start to hear some news. And if it gets past that, it does change a little bit. Um, I don't know that you have any direct dog in the fight on this Terry deal, but where do you think it lands? And I think he stays in Washington. Do you think the same?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Just because it's not about who Terry is on the field, but it's also about who Terry is in the locker room, right? And we always hear about teams trying to build culture and all those pieces. And obviously, Washington took a big step in the positive way last season, winning on the field, building a winning culture. And Terry is a big part of that. And again, he's productive on the field. So I think he's a Washington Commander this season and into the future beyond. I think look, this negotiation is not going to be easy, right? If you look at Peters' kind of background and coming from San Francisco and how they've done some extensions, those have not been easy negotiations either. But ultimately, I think it gets done.
I'm with you. You start to hear numbers thrown around? I think the DK Metcalf deal sets a pretty easy comparison. You this is a really important time, I'd say, for fans to not believe the vast majority of stuff you see on the internet. Um, but does that DK around 32 mil a year thing sound right, or do you think he creeps up just because he's next in line?
I think DK's deal is a little rich for me for Terry McLaurin going into
Mm,
age 30 season. See,
sure.
I think the difference between those guys who are at that 30 million and beyond numbers that they're all younger guys, right? And Even though Terry has not shown signs of slowing down on the field, you still, as an organization, are a little leery of paying that type of money, top of the market money, to a wide receiver going into their age 30 season. I think the deal, the player, and this is both positive and negative, actually, that is most captivating for me as it relates to thinking about Terry McLaurin is actually Chris Godwin. And I'm not saying because of the 22 million per year number that he signed for in Tampa. It's more so the fact that the New England Patriots were willing to pay him $30 million per year in free agency this year, coming off a severe ankle injury. Um, and he's also, from an age standpoint, very similar to Terry. I think Chris Godwin's 29. And so the fact that in free agency, a team was willing to pay a 29-year-old wide receiver coming off of a severe injury $30 million per year, I think works in Terry's favor, but it also works against Terry in that he ended up signing in Tampa for 22. So I say all that to say that maybe it's not DK Metcalf's 32 million per year, but maybe it's a number closer to T Higgins 29 million per year, where by virtue of, look, I get it. He plays opposite of Jamar Chase, who is top of the market. And so T Higgins, technically speaking, is a number two wide receiver. And as a number two wide receiver, he's getting 29. So if you're saying, okay, well, Terry McLaurin's a number one wide receiver, but he's 30 years old this season, maybe that 28, $29 million per year number makes sense.
Interesting. And then I think I think there's a lot of maybe not misinformation, but some of this is hard for people that aren't familiar with salary cap and contract negotiations. Like you've been in the room, you know these things inside and out. The actual machinations to getting this done. So Terry has a year left on his current contract, but it not much guaranteed money. So what they're talking about now is a contract extension. So what happens this year, and then what are the guarantees like going forward?
Yeah, so effectively, his 19 plus million that he's going to make in cash this year is guaranteed just because he's going to be a Washington Commander, right? The question now becomes when we talk about these extension contracts, and again, for a player going into their age 30 season, it's likely a 2 year extension or a 3 year extension. It's not going to be, 4 or 5 years. So what does that mean? It means that beyond the 2025 season, assuming they get a deal done, it's going to make Terry a commander through the 26, 27, and likely 28 seasons, right? So those would be the 3 new years. And when we
Yep.
talk about those average per year numbers, we're talking about, well, how much quote unquote new money beyond the 19 million that he's supposed to make is going to be the value of this new deal. So if we're talking about, for easy numbers, $30 million per year for Terry McLaurin, even though I think again it's 28 or 29 is more likely to me, but for easy math, 30 million over 3 new years, that's 90 million plus the 19 that he's already on the books for, that gets you at 109 million over the next 4 seasons, including this year. So, that's what we're talking about. But again, like I mentioned when I was talking about what's the appropriate APY for Terry McLaurin, you really have to, from a club perspective, mitigate against, okay, what if he suffers a significant injury? What if there is a decline because he is going into his age 30 season? If I'm his agent, I'm knowing that this is probably his last big bite at the apple contractually. And so I need to maximize, probably the biggest metric, even though I've talked a lot about APY, is how much is going to be truly guaranteed at signing, right?
Right.
Because when we talk about the mechanics of these deals, we know that there's a difference between the quote unquote total guarantee and what's truly guaranteed at signing. So the Cliff Notes version of that dynamic is he may have 70 million that's guaranteed in some form or fashion, but only 45 million of it is truly guaranteed for skill, injury, and cap at
Yeah.
signing, and the other 25 million he has to be on a roster at a certain point in the future in order for that to become guaranteed. So those are all the different kind of construct and mechanisms that both club and agent need to be aware of.
Yeah. I mean, it's in some ways it's simple because there is like a framework where you got to land, but then you've got competing agendas and you know, you hear these reports and I don't know how much validity there is to them, but like Terry's frustrated by the speed of which he's getting his contract done. I work on contracts. I know you did when you were in front offices. Like that's the structure. You know what's frustrating is dealing with your contract. like whether it's for $100 or 100 million. There's natural friction points along the way. Does it seem like this is all just kind of part of the process?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like these conversations are never easy. Now, they're, or said a different way, they're difficult to varying degrees, right? And we always talk about the NFL being a relationship business, right? Whether we're talking about the relationship between player, coaches in the front office, relationships between the front office and agents. The better that you have, or the more strong and trusting relationships you have across all of those different variables, the less difficult these conversations are. But anytime we talk about compensation, like you said, whether we're talking about $1 or $100 million in the corporate world or in the sports world, these are emotional conversations because you're talking about the way people provide for their families, right? But again, relationships matter, and along those lines, part of the reason as a front office why you want to get a Terry McLaurin done is because you want to manage the relationship with the players in your locker room, and if they see that they're not getting Terry McLaurin done, a guy who is the poster child for what they want a commander to be. If they can't get him done, then why would they, get me done as a young player who doesn't have the same goodwill and equity that a Terry McLaurin has? So again, it's a relationship business, and you want to manage that accordingly when you're doing these deals.
Clearly. That picture behind you, a lot has changed since that picture, man. That's
A lot has changed.
is that 18? What year was that?
This is the 2017 season. Yep, there.
17. Okay.
Yeah, the 17 season, the first year, the Chargers are in LA. Washington has a different logo, a different team name. A lot of players in this picture are no longer in the league. Like I think Morgan Moses is in this picture
Right.
somewhere, and obviously Morgan has just stayed in the Northeast his entire career. But
Still going.
yeah, he's still going. But and obviously the Chargers are in a way better stadium. I think the one thing that has not changed though is that the Chargers have more visiting fans in their games than they do their own home fans. Because I remember at this game, like you and I have previously talked about, a lot of Washington fans in the stands at this game.
It was packed. I remember that game all too well. I'm pulling up the actual box score now. So that was December 10th, 2017. Jay Gruden coaching, Kirk Cousins at quarterback. They lost 30-13 that day, and it was not even that close. They got a late pick six from Bashad Breeland. Just an absolute. I will leave out names, but I remember um, the guys getting off the bus, and one of the traveling Washington media members says to me, he's like, "Man, they do not look locked in," and sure enough, they were not.
No, it definitely showed on the field that day. I mean, what I remember is one running into Doug Williams at the stadium. Doug's just a great guy. Always loved running into Doug and
How long have you
introducing.
known him?
I've been around Doug since my time in the league office back in the early 2000s.
Yeah,
Just because Doug has always been a great mentor to young people getting into the front office side of this business, and he continues to do that. I also remember going back to this game. I just remember being how beautiful of a day it was, and that's why I captured this picture. Just because you see the Southern California palm trees in the background of this
sure.
picture, and so when you talk about the Washington team not being locked in, yeah, you're in that Southern California. It's great weather. It's December. Think about that. You're coming from, the DC winter and
Yeah.
getting out to Southern California. It was probably like in the low 70s that day, blue skies, palm trees. It's easy to not be completely locked in that scenario.
I left hand up, I might not have been locked in. Who knows? Obviously, you didn't work with him, right? His work predated you significantly. But I wonder if you met Bobby Bethard or even the family members. Did you see they just named the draft room in Ashburn after Bobby Bethard?
Yeah, I did see that. Never had a chance to meet or work with Bobby, but obviously having grown up in PG County, super familiar with just the glory days of Washington, right? I think, it's kind of right after Joe Gibbs, the next guy on the list to that heyday is Bobby Bethard, right? Like
Yeah.
those were the two guys, the catalysts for that success in the 80s. And now having worked in Ashburn, my office was right next door to the draft room. If you were to ever see the draft room, and maybe it's been updated since I worked there, kind of underwhelming.
Yeah.
So, based upon what I remember the draft room to be, the fact that they've named it after their legendary great general manager from their heyday, it's a little bit of an underwhelming room. Just think of it being
They've
a comp.
everything looks very different now. They've
Okay.
torn it all up to the studs. It's you would no longer be underwhelmed. You should come on back
Okay,
for a
good.
visit. Yeah.
I'm happy to know, just because for a long time that facility was just behind kind of the curb in terms of competing and comparing to
Totally.
other NFL kind of facilities. And so, yeah, no, but no, Bobby Bethard has a long legacy, obviously, in a big part of the tradition of the Washington organization, and so is super deserving of having that room named after him.
Yeah, the new ownership group doesn't mess around, man. They've already done more in about 2 years than the previous guy did in 20. It's unbelievable.
I think, and here's the thing, and this is what winning will do for a fan base, is that you quickly forget kind of how bad, for lack of a better word, things were prior to this new regime. The fact that people are asking, would you rather have the current team name and new ownership, or the new ownership relative to the team name and versus, the previous owner and the old
It's
name?
nuts.
It's a crazy question, right? Because people just forget how bad things were, particularly at the tail end there with the
Oh my
previous
God.
ownership,
It was
right? And we're talking about the team name, right? In exchange for that.
You'd be surprised how much to a to a portion of the fan base, the team name stuff is still so incredibly polarizing and divisive. But by and large, I think more and more people, you know what's more fun than fighting? Watching Jaden Daniels play quarterback.
Right. And again, having a legitimate franchise quarterback, a guy who is on the trajectory to be a superstar face of the league, again, it really makes you forget things. And I agree. I think it's actually helping more people actually embrace the new team name, right? Because now it's becoming synonymous with something,
Right.
right? So
Um,
I think that Jaden Daniels, I was watching something earlier today, and they're talking about Lamar Jackson getting a new deal, and could Jalen Hurts be getting a new deal? Hope those guys get those deals, and Jaden Daniels continues to play at a high level, because he's going to break the bank when he gets his extension.
you still calling for 100 mil a year?
Not 100. I'm
90?
on the record as saying 90, I think.
90.
Maybe I
Okay.
said 100 when I was on the air with you previously, but I think it more realistically, it could be 90. It's going to definitely be a number with like an 8 in front of it, if not a 9.
I know. It's crazy. I've taken up too much of your time. I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for having me as always, man.
Still the one seed of agent front office people Twitter handles at salary cap 101. Yeah, the absolute one seed.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
dude.
I appreciate it.
All right, JI. Thank you, man.
Yeah, man.